Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking Neil Hamilton's deep academic research on assessing professionalism and turning it into a really revealing look at exactly how society regulates power and expertise. And what we're going to find here is that the working world actually operates on this massive, secret, unwritten deal. So what exactly is professionalism? We almost always think of it as, simply wearing a nice suit, showing up on time, or maybe just being polite in a meeting. But from a sociological and legal standpoint, it is actually a massive, high-stakes monopoly granted by society itself. It's a structural agreement that allows certain groups of people to completely control their own work. Now, to understand why society would ever willingly grant a monopoly to a group of workers, we have to look at the alternative. Let's contrast two entirely different ways of organizing work to really get a grip on this. On one side, we've got the dominant market ideology. Under this system, consumers rule, and businesses provide whatever we want at the absolute lowest cost. It's highly efficient, sure, but it assumes the consumer knows exactly what they need. But then, on the other side, we have professional ideology. And here, peers rule, not consumers. Why? Well, because the tasks performed by lawyers, doctors, or engineers involve these really transcendent values like justice, safety, and human life. The average consumer honestly just doesn't have the specialized knowledge to evaluate a complex surgical procedure or a nuanced legal defense. Because of this, society actually gives the occupation itself the control over the work to protect those critical values. Because this legal and sociological theory is pretty layered, we'll use this quick cognitive roadmap to guide our journey. We'll cover the unwritten social contract, losing the public's trust, defining the undefinable, the 5 elements, and finally building a personal conscience. All right, let's dive right into Section 1, the unwritten social contract. This tacit agreement we've been talking about is a literal exchange. Society grants the profession incredible power. We're talking total autonomy to regulate itself, control over who gets to enter, think of medical boards or passing the bar exam, and exclusive legal jurisdiction. I mean, you literally cannot practice law without a license. But in exchange for all that power, society demands strict duties. The profession basically promises to maintain minimum competence, to discipline its own members who fail to meet those standards, and crucially, to restrain self-interest to serve the public purpose. The professionals must put the public good above their own desire for maximum profit. That right there, that is the deal. Which brings us to Section 2, losing the public's trust. So what happens when the experts start breaking their end of the deal? Well, it turns out this social contract is definitely not permanent. When professionals fail to restrain their self-interest, the public steps in to renegotiate. Take the early 2000s, for example. The accounting profession completely failed as a public gatekeeper during the whole Enron debacle. In response, Congress passed the Sarbanes-Oxley Act in 2002, which fundamentally stripped away the accounting profession's peer review authority and substituted heavy federal regulations. It was a massive warning shot to the legal profession, too. And we see this exact same renegotiation happening in medicine today, with the rapid growth of managed care organizations heavily regulating a physician's daily autonomy. Now, when professions try to defend against this kind of market takeover, their arguments often fall completely flat. As sociologist Elliot Freidson notes, they don't point to the transcendent principles they are supposed to be protecting. Instead, they complain about job security and their so-called rights. The public sees right through this patent self-interested behavior, loses trust, and defaults to treating them like any other business where the lowest cost wins. Let's move on to Section 3, defining the undefinable. To actually save this contract, professions have to figure out exactly what it is they're supposed to be defending in the first place. The problem is, without a really clear definition of professionalism, legal and medical schools just default to teaching students the bare minimum floor of competence, mostly just how to avoid being sued. If students are only taught how to dodge malpractice liability, they're naturally going to assume professionalism just means don't break the law. Without a true north that embraces core values, decision-making quickly becomes dominated by things like grades, prestige, and maximizing personal income. This leads us right into Section 4, the 5 elements. To fix this whole definition problem, we can look at how the American Bar Association synthesized a definitive framework for what an ethical professional identity actually looks like. And it builds in 5 crucial steps. Step 1 is continuous growth and personal conscience. Step 2 is the ethics of duty, basically complying with those minimum standards and rules. Step 3 pushes higher to the ethics of aspiration, where you internalize the profession's highest core values over an entire career. Step 4 means holding your peers accountable, because self-regulation requires actual peer review. And finally, Step 5, acting as a fiduciary. This is where your dedication to serving the public good completely overbalances any drive for personal wealth. And finally, we arrive at Section 5, building a personal conscience. Now, what's really fascinating here is that first step, personal conscience. It's the absolute foundational requirement to keep this entire framework from just collapsing back into pure self-interest. Moral psychology gives us a practical tool to build this conscience, starting with something called moral sensitivity. And this isn't just some vague feeling, it is a rigorous awareness. It requires a deep understanding of our own intuitions and the emotional capacity to literally take on the roles of others. It means imaginatively constructing how your specific actions are going to cascade down a cause and consequence chain and impact the lives of everyone involved. This fits perfectly into the psychological model of moral behavior. Component 1 is moral sensitivity, actually perceiving that a moral issue exists in the first place, and understanding exactly who will be impacted. But component 2 is where the professional specialized skill truly kicks in, moral reasoning and judgment. Once you use moral sensitivity to see how people are affected, you must deliberate and judge which of the available actions is actually the most just. It's not just about what is legally allowed, but what is morally justifiable within the core values of that specific profession. So as you can see, this social contract isn't permanent. It's a living, breathing agreement that relies heavily on self-reflection, pure feedback, and an unwavering commitment to put the public good above our own personal wealth. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this. Take a moment to reflect on your own identity in the workforce. If the public audited your profession today, examining your competence, your internal discipline, and your restraint of self-interest, would they renew your contract? Or would they just hand your job over to the market? Keep exploring, keep reflecting, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.